Rajat Nag, Managing Director General of the Asian Development Bank. Thanks for joining us on INSEAD Knowledge. You're one of the speakers at the INSEAD Leadership Summit Asia 2008. And in the summit, you'll be talking about Asia's position in terms of the financial crisis and so on. Is it possible for Asia to be decoupled from what's happening across the world?
No, absolutely not. I mean, uncoupling was always a myth, and if that needed to be blown up, the financial crisis has done it. You cannot be, on the one hand, benefiting from globalization and be part of the globalized world, and on the other, hope you're uncoupled from the downsides. No, Asia is not uncoupled at all, and therefore Asia is affected both in the financial sense and in the real sense. And next year, 2009, is going to be a very difficult year for Asia.
Just how bad? I mean, we're already talking about slowdown in growth of China, perhaps to 6%, but just how bad will things get?
6% is probably too pessimistic. We're looking at more like 8%, which for China is bad news, considering it's been growing at 11% plus. India, we're looking more like 7%. But the important thing is that even though these growth rates appear healthy, 8 and 7 are certainly very healthy compared to the anemic growths you're seeing in the rest of the world, particularly in Europe or in the US. But you also got to recognize that these countries have a huge youth population coming into the labor market, and so therefore unemployment at 7 to 8% growth rates is still going to be huge and increasing. So that's a big concern for Asia, that the rising youth will not be absorbed if the economies don't grow fast enough. That's number one. Other one is poverty. I mean, Asia's biggest challenge is poverty. 600 million plus people at below $1 a day who did not really benefit much when things were going well, but are hit on the downside. So they get a double whammy. They don't benefit on the growth side, they get hit on the downside. So that's a cause for concern.
How are they being hit? Is it essentially through the exchange rates and the, say, goods being imported?
It's a combination. Our estimates show that every 1% decline in GDP growth in Asia means about 25 million people don't climb off the poverty trap who otherwise would have. So they are basically hit by rising unemployment, falling incomes, less spending down the chain. So the challenge for Asia is going to be how to come out of this 1 or 2 years of economic downturn. I've no doubt that in the long run, in 3-4 years, we'll be back on the growth track and Asia's growth prospects are solid. But the immediate needs are for a very significant and a wise mix of fiscal and monetary stimulus, keeping the exchange rates flexible, making sure protectionism doesn't creep back into the sort of thinking process, making sure that the reforms in the financial sector aren't stalled. So the next 2 years will need leadership in the true sense of the word. There'll be many temptations to pull the hatches down and bunker down, and that will be the worst thing that one can do. So I'm very pleased actually to be at the leadership summit in INSEAD today, because I think what the world needs, and certainly Asia needs, is strong, pragmatic leadership, which will focus on a regional and a global solution to the crisis, and certainly avoid any nationalistic policies, which will be more like beggar thy neighbor. And I don't think the Asian leaders are doing that, but it's very important to remember not to do it.
One of the main problems going forward, though, is that Asian economies are so dependent on exporting to the US. There is no way around that.
That's right. In the short term, yes. I think that's a very major constraint, obviously. Asia exports about 60% of its total exports to Europe, US, and Japan. So obviously, if these three economies were to be hit, and they are badly hit, obviously Asia will be hit. Two things have to be done. One is Asia must take steps to really boost domestic consumption, particularly say in China, where the domestic consumption accounts for less than 40% of the GDP. So there's a huge sort of potential there. Second is to see if there can be greater intra-Asian trade. East Asia, for example, already trades about 55% of its output within itself. South Asia, however, only trades less than 5%. So there's a huge scope in South Asia to increase its intra-regional trade. So increase domestic consumption, increase intra-Asian trade. But this will take some time. So yes, Asia will be hit, no question about it.
It's already come up in one of the sessions. Friend Suma Vrosh, and he's now the chairman of INSEAD.
Right.
He was saying, well, just how do you get the Chinese to spend more money? The mentality in Asia is to save money, effectively. Yes. How do you now get them to spend?
Yeah, but again, I mean, I wouldn't want a virtue to now somehow be seen to be a vice. So I think saving is a good thing, but it is how those savings are used. I think in Asia what will need to happen is greater investments in productive infrastructure, physical infrastructure, for example, health, education. So I think what the governments will need to do is probably run up their fiscal deficits if they need to. In China, they run a fiscal surplus, so they have got fiscal space. In India, fiscal deficits are roughly about 5.4% of GDP. I would not worry, quite frankly, about those fiscal deficits going up if it's productive investments. So Asian savings, a positive, but it can be, as you are implying, a negative if it just sort of ends up in low interest bearing bonds or US Treasury notes, or worse, under the mattress. So key thing is to get the investments going in Asia, particularly in productive investments in infrastructure.
But that is going to be a long-term solution.
It is going to be medium to long term. You know, I should say that that has been the process which has gone on for quite a while. The important thing is not to let it stall because of the economic crisis. And this is our message to the governments, that make sure that the investments keep going in infrastructure, even if it means increasing the fiscal deficit for a while.
Rajat Nag, thanks for joining us on INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you very much.